Let's begin with the silence. It's a quiet kind that doesn't show up in headlines. Instead, it rings out in bedrooms, in basements, in lonely late night drives. And it's a silence that's in men's lives specifically. It's a silence when they're hurting, and it's a silence when they're afraid. The silence that shows up when they're on the very brink and no one notices. And it's not the loud ones that we're losing. I think it's instead the quiet ones. The ones who are taught to keep it together, the ones who are taught to push through, to man up, the ones who laugh when they want to cry. It's the ones who shut down when they need to be heard. The ones who joke about pain because they've never been allowed to name it. We live in a world that's confused masculinity with mute strength. And the data is telling us that it's killing men. Men account for nearly 80% of all suicides worldwide. And in some regions, that number is even higher. Like in the US, middle-aged men, white men especially, are most at risk in this demographic. They were told that they'd be just fine if they worked hard enough and stayed stoic and just provided. They did all of that and they're still dying anyways. And we're also seeing a rise in what public health experts call the death of despair, and overdoses and chronic alcoholism and suicide, and all disproportionately affecting men. These are not freak accidents. They're patterns and symptoms of an even deeper disease. Disconnection and emotional suppression and identity crisis that's gone untreated for decades. And here's where the incel experience intersects in sharp and specific ways. See, when despair meets rejection, and when loneliness meets ridicule, when the pain of being wanted gets met with cold indifference or even scorn, what we see that is left is, for many men especially those who identify with the incel label, there's not a lot to look forward to. There's not much hope. There's not a lot of help. It's just internet forums and frustrations and feelings that they've been told that they're not allowed to have or to express. And that's where this episode today begins. Not in the stats alone, but in the heartbreak behind the numbers, because these numbers aren't just data points. There's people behind them. They're sons, they're brothers, they're fathers, they're friends. They're human beings who've been left behind emotionally, and then they've been blamed for struggling in the first place. And our culture is deeply uncomfortable with male pain. We ridicule it, we minimize it, we ignore it, we label struggling men as threats before we've ever asked, what was it that hurt them? We roll our eyes when they cry out, and then we wonder why they stop reaching out. But let's be honest. When male despair erupts, whether in the form of violence or withdrawal or complete emotional shutdown, we suddenly pay attention, but we don't often connect the dots. We treat tragedy as an isolated incident instead of seeing the pattern for what it is, and that is a crisis of connection. And this crisis doesn't belong only to incels. It's not just a problem of a few extreme cases. It's a symptom of something much broader and far more dangerous. It's a symptom that punishes vulnerability in men especially. It's a culture that doesn't teach boys how to feel or speak or even look for support. It's a world where the only acceptable male emotions that are available are anger, or ambition or even apathy. It's a society where male worth is measured in status and performance and productivity, but not with relational depth or even emotional maturity. And that framework, it sets men up for failure. And when they do fail, when they break down or fall behind, they're often told to do so alone because they've been taught that asking for help makes them weak, that needing connection makes them look needy, that acknowledging the pain makes them far less of a man. And so they go silent. They turn inward. They either numb out or they lash out. And too often, the world only notices once it's too late. But what could it look like if we noticed earlier? Could it be like if we treated earlier the signs of despair with the urgency that they deserve? What if we looked at the stats, not to shame or to scold, but instead to understand, to humanize, to see the person? Because the rise of male despair is not just a gender issue. It's at the core, it's a human issue. It's not about assigning blame. It's more about offering bridges back to hope and back to one's dignity and bridges back to connection. That's what today's episode is for. It's not to excuse the harm. It's not to erase accountability. Instead, it's to explore what happens when a generation of men grows up emotionally malnourished and then is expected to thrive. So let's begin with a deeper dive. Let's start by examining where this despair is showing up most clearly and what the stats are that are screaming at us to see. So I want to examine where this despair shows up most clearly, especially through the numbers that are often whispered, if they even mentioned at all. So I want to start with education. So with reference to education across North America, many parts of the world included, but especially in America, boys are falling behind. And in the US, especially, girls are outperforming boys at every level of education. They're more likely to graduate high school, to enroll in college and earn degrees. And today, it says that women are accounting for 60% of college graduates, especially in the US, which is a complete reversal from just a few decades ago. And this, again, is not a blame game. It's just more of a reality check. When fewer men are completing higher education, it narrows access to better paying jobs. But beyond that, it also chips away at something that's deeper, and that's a sense of one's trajectory. See, for generations, young men could follow a well-worn path to find their social value. So that was, you finish school, you get a job, you provide for your family, and the path is now fragmented. And for men in the incel community, this often translates to a very painful loop. They say things like, I'm not successful, and so that's why I'm not attractive. And if I'm not attractive, then I don't deserve connection. And if I'm not connected, it must mean I'm not worth anything at all. And that loop is fueled not just by personal experience, but by a society that increasingly ties worth to achievement and desirability. It's a brutal metric, and men are falling into it and failing in silence. I want to look next at employment. So in many regions, especially in post-industrial areas, male participation in the labor force has been declining steadily for quite some time. And while automation and outsourcing and economic shifts affect everyone, they have had a very disproportionately emotional impact on men particularly, especially those who have been raised with the belief that their identity is inseparable from their income. And so when that income vanishes, many men don't just lose money, they lose a lot more. They lose their sense of meaning. They lose their sense of validation. And in the absence of that, despair grows incrementally. And then, of course, there's social connection. There was a study in 2021 that revealed that nearly 1 in 5 men reported 0 close friends. And that was a 5-fold increase since the 1990s. And these aren't just stats, these are warning signs. They're red flags that are waving in front of us. Loneliness is a public health issue, and it's as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, according to some of the health studies. But unlike smoking, we rarely intervene when we see someone withdrawing socially. We assume instead it's just their personality, or worse, we don't see it at all. And for many incels, this isolation is acute. It's not just about romantic loneliness, it's more so about being cut off from meaningful connection. Especially when there's no friends and no confidants, there's no safe spaces to be seen without shame. And in that isolation, a worldview begins to form. And that is that everyone else gets intimacy and I get invisibility. That belief, when it's untreated, becomes very corrosive. Because if no one wants to know you, what's the point of being known? And when that belief meets a digital culture, it finds fuel. The online world, for all of its connectivity, it often intensifies that sense of disconnection. The algorithms reward outrage, forums can become echo chambers of anger, validation comes not from healing, but from doubling down on the hurt. And still, many of these men keep showing up. Not because they're hateful, but more so because they're hungry. Hungry for attention, for belonging, for a sense of power in a world that has made them to feel powerless. Now consider one's mental health, especially in what's available for services that tend to mental health. Men are far less likely than women to seek for help or therapy. And it's not because they don't need it, it's because they've been internalizing the idea that asking for help makes them feel weak. And that belief keeps thousands of men out of treatment and keeps the rest hiding the pain behind the sarcasm and withdrawal, or even a toxic flavor of bravado. And even when they do speak up, they're often met with confusion, or worse, with contempt. They're told to get over it. They're told to stop complaining. They're told to stop being fragile. So they bottle it up. They cope through the silence, or through the substance abuse, if that's what they're struggling with, or numbing routines that stretch across many years, until one day they just stop coping at all, and they choose to give up entirely. And that's what the suicide stats reflect. It's not failure per se, but more so absence of emotional support, absence of safe spaces, absence of people who saw their pain before it became heavy, far too heavy to carry. And this isn't inevitable. It's actually interruptible. It's interruptible only, though, if we stop treating despair as a personal flaw, and if we instead start seeing it as a cultural signal. So in the next section, I want to explore a little bit of where these signals are leading us and how we can begin to chart a different course. So let's talk about what happens when these warning signs go unanswered. Because despair, especially when it's ignored, it doesn't just disappear. It metastasizes. It's inward, or it expresses itself outward. And the longer it goes unacknowledged, the more distorted it becomes. And for many men, especially those in incel spaces, this distortion, it creates a sense of existential collapse. The belief that not only are they undesirable, but that they're also irredeemable. That no amount of effort will ever earn them love and connection, or even basic respect. And this belief, it isn't built overnight. It's built from repetition, from years of silence and rejection and dismissal, self-loathing as well, all layered in by a culture that offers no template for emotional repair. So what do you do with pain when you've never been taught how to feel it in the first place? You either numb it or you narrate it into something else. And for many men, numbing is the more plausible option. They self-isolate, they disappear into gaming, and into pornography, into substance abuse, and they follow this mechanical routine that's devoid of relational meaning, not because they didn't care, but because caring hurts so much when nothing comes back ever. And so others begin to narrate their pain into something far more aggressive. They create these philosophies or online identities and community lexicons that turn vulnerability into ideology. And in inceldom, it becomes not just a state of being, but an actual worldview and a lens that they see the world through. It becomes their shield and a language, a home that feels familiar. It offers clarity in the face, especially of chaos. An explanation in the face of shame is a powerful thing for them. This brotherhood in the face of abandonment, this mutual sense that they experience. But oftentimes it does so by reinforcing the very hopelessness that created this in the first place. It offers this camaraderie while at the same time hardening their hearts. It offers this feeling of belonging while they deepen the sense of resentment. It gives them a vocabulary, and at the same time it stifles their vulnerability. And that's the paradox at the very core of male despair online. It's the very communities that promise relief that can deepen the wound if they are not grounded in the first place. Grounded in compassion and healing and what growth could look like. So how do we interrupt this spiral that they're in? Well, we begin by creating new spaces for men to feel human before they collapse into this caricature that is being proposed to them. Spaces where they're allowed to say things like, I'm scared that I'll never be chosen, or I feel invisible, or I don't know what it means to even be a man anymore, or even, I just want someone to want me. These are not shameful things to admit. These are very human longings that all of us experience. And until men have spaces to voice without a sense of ridicule, they're going to keep turning to whatever space or place will let them speak, even if those spaces encourage their bitterness more than their healing. But here's the challenge. society doesn't often know what to do with male pain. So it will either mock their pain or it will moralize it. And so we try to explain it away, or we react with fear when it starts to boil over. But very rarely will we choose to sit with it. Rare even more to listen or ask questions or make room for these experiences that others have. Not just because it's sad, but because it's sacred. The pain tells the truth about where love was withheld. And all males who experience pain, in particular the ones that tell the story of a world that does not know how to hold their hearts without hardening them first, unfortunately that's the norm. This isn't just about saving men from despair. It's more so about saving all of us from a society where emotional estrangement has become the norm. Because when men are emotionally exiled, they take that exile with them into every relationship, into every workplace, into every interaction that they engage in. And the cost isn't just personal. The cost is actually quite collective. It affects fathers who cannot connect with their sons. It impacts partners who can't name their needs. It touches the lives of friends who don't know how to ask for help. It affects leaders who lead from fear instead of from being present. And the rise of male despair isn't just a mental health crisis. It's more of a cultural reckoning. And it asks all of us, what kind of world are we building if half of its population is silently suffering? So explore with me, if you would, what a different answer might look like in this next little bit here. I want you to imagine with me a different ending. Not one where male despair is fixed by force or cured by criticism, but one where it is healed through application of common humanity. See, that begins with redefining what strength really is. And for too long, we've been told that strength means never showing weakness, never crying, never doubting, never reaching out. But real strength, it's the courage to feel. It's the courage to name things. It's the courage to stay, to be fully present in your body, even when your heart aches and your eyes are blurry from tears and your voice shakes. That kind of strength builds a life that's worth living. And it starts in small and ordinary moments. It starts when a father tells his son that it's okay to cry. It starts when a friend doesn't flinch at the words, "I'm not okay." It initiates when a man sits with another man's grief without offering solutions, just his presence. And these moments might not go viral, but they're what save people. Because at the core of male despair isn't just pain. It's this belief that pain must be hidden, that no one would ever stay if they saw the mess, that vulnerability is more of a liability. And when that belief holds power, men's lives look like fugitives, running from themselves, running from others until they run out of time. And so how do we dismantle this belief? First, we build this culture that honors integrity. Not just the image of integrity, but the core of integrity. Integrity for me means aligning your inner values with what you actually do on the outside, which is hard, especially when it's hard. And when it's uncomfortable, to still commit to integrity, even when it means telling the truth about your loneliness instead of posturing your success. And the second to integrity is where we intentionally practice intimacy. And what I define as intimacy in this series is intimacy. It's where we allow ourselves to be known, not just as competent and accomplished, not just as funny or put together, but also as individuals who have needs and longings and hurts and healings. That's what connection requires. Not perfection, not performative confidence, but presence. And this is where we collectively come in together. If we want to change the trajectory of male despair, we need to stop asking men to simply do better or just man up. Instead, we need to ask, what systems have failed you? What stories did we feed you about your sense of value? And who was it that taught you that your feelings were shameful? Who was it that mocked your softness before you even knew how to use your voice to express it? These questions matter, not to assign blame, but instead to spark compassion and to remember that many were never taught how to nurture intimacy because they never actually saw it modeled in the first place. Many were punished for the emotions before they could even name what those emotions were. Many men were told that earning affection required performance and not presence. And many, when they finally spoke up, were laughed at, were dismissed, or even misunderstood. Pardon me. And that kind of rejection, it leaves a very impacting imprint on the soul. But it can be rewritten, because healing isn't just for those who've already been suffering indefinitely. It's for those who still don't know how to ask for help. It's also for men who don't have the words to articulate. For boys who are already beginning to see that experience of shutting down. For the friend who keeps changing the subject. For the stranger whose silence is his loudest cry. We reach them not by yelling louder, but first by softening, by becoming safe places that they can feel comfortable opening up to, by being the kind of people who can hold a mess without trying to fix that mess too fast. But it's by living with integrity and offering intimacy, not as a luxury, but as a language that we all deserve access to be able to speak. So what does that bridge back to us really look like? It looks like this. It looks like less advice, more listening, less judgment and more curiosity, less performative strength and more embodied truth. It looks like choosing to build something that's quieter and slower and more real. A world where men don't have to earn love through silence or suffer their humanity in exile. It's a world where male despair is not ignored until it becomes dangerous, but instead it's held with tenderness before it's even heard and it's screamed. That's not just a better world for men. That translates to a better world for society, for everyone, because when men heal, they don't just stop hurting. See, when men heal, they start loving. in beautiful ways. They start leading with gentleness, and they start showing up for their communities, not as ghosts, not as threats, but as whole human beings. This is the world that we could experience and build collectively if only we would choose to let go of the ridicule, if we embraced restoration, if we let the numbers shock us appropriately, but at the same time let compassion shape what it is that we're going to do next. That's the bridge back to us.